I'm James Lynch, and this is my stock report for UFC Vegas 103, taking a look at the biggest winners and losers from the event. This was an obvious one for this past weekend's card. Manel Kape, biggest stock riser, no questions asked. Really good performance here in the main event. You know, coming into this fight, I talked about it a little bit on the preview show. You got that really good win over Bruno Silva, but Bruno Silva is not exactly a guy that, you know, is necessarily means if you beat him, you're on your road to a title shot here. I thought that was a good win, but this was a really good victory here against Asu. Now, I know Kape was favored going in, but to go out there and put the performance he put on, get the finish especially, that's a big thing we haven't seen from Kape. Prior to the Bruno Silva fight, there was a lot of decisions, if you look at it there. Hadn't had a knockout since 2021 prior to the one over Bruno Silva. He gets one here in the main event. It's a 5-round fight, and he looked great. And then, of course, there's the famous meme of Asu running away, but just the optics of the card last night. Kape, I really thought, showed not only does he belong in a title shot, but I kind of want to see him fight next. I know they've got Kai Kara France booked, but if you're Kape, stay ready just in case something happens to that fight. Would love to see Kape get his opportunity to take on Pantoja, but really good performance here from Manel Kape, capping off a fairly good card on Saturday night at the Apex. But Manel Kape, again, just dominant win, and then you like to see him get the finish there as well. So that was a big win there for Manel Kape. Okay, second biggest stock riser. Again, not a talent-heavy card on this one, but I think it has to be Cody Brundage. So he was an underdog, slight underdog, I think, going into this fight against Julian Marquez. Marquez was a slight favorite, former training partners. Brundage needed this to save his job. If you look at it going into the fight, he was on a bit of a losing streak in this one as my browser's taking a second to load. But you can see there, he had the no contest. He had the loss to Bo Nickel. He was one of these fighters that would, win one or two and then lose a couple in a row. So to get a win like this, especially a first round finish, certainly looks good on the resume here for Cody Brundage. He's probably going to get himself another contract. My understanding is this was the last fight on his deal. So just from a perspective of, are you in the UFC or not? I think he basically kept his job in the UFC with that win. So for me, Cody Brundage has got to be on that list for another big stock riser on this card. Okay, third biggest stock riser on this card is a guy that was an underdog and ends up getting a split decision win, and that is Haider Emil. He's now 11-0. Good win for him here. Gomes, I kind of figured that Gomes was going to have some trouble with Haider Emil. Ends up going to a split. You would have liked to see a finish here, but just the fact that this is a guy that is now hasn't lost in the UFC. He's got 3 straight wins. He might get a ranked opponent next. We'll see. Just the way the division's going. He's 34 years old, not getting any younger. I do wonder if the UFC wants to just, put him in those really good fights and positions to see if he can move up a little bit in the weight class. But I thought this was a good performance in the, on this card. And again, beating a guy like William Gomes is a little bit younger than him. If you remember, going into this fight, I think what was the age gap there? 27 to 34. Very good, and you always like to see an underdog come out on top here, so I thought Haider Emil definitely has to get a mention here as far as a biggest stock riser. And then as far as an honorable mention, got to go with Mario Pinto, highlight reel finish over Austin Lane. Again, he was favored in this fight, but with heavyweight being at the state it's at, we talked about this on the preview show last week, it's the rankings, it's pretty wide open right now, so a guy like Mario Pinto getting a win here, wouldn't be shocked if he gets ranked with this victory, but you got to like the fact you got a heavyweight that's under 30 and is going out there and performing quite well. He's 26 years old, which is not common for heavyweight fighters in the weight class. And I know Austin Lane's probably on his way out, but that was a very good win there for Mario Pinto. That was one of the highlight reel finishes that we certainly saw, and he gets that performance of the night bonus as well to cap things off. Okay, stock droppers. Don't think this was a huge shocker here. Biggest stock dropper on this card has got to be Danny Barlow. So he was a big favorite going into this fight. He came in at minus 225. Moderate favorite, like it kind of says there. Gets finished. First time he's been finished in his career. Again, this looked like a bit of a good fight for him here. Sam Patterson hadn't really fought the opposition. And I think that's why he was such a big underdog here. And Danny Barlow gets finished. Again, 29 years old. Looked like a pretty promising prospect here, and he still could be. Again, it's just one loss, but for me, Barlow had a lot of hype, didn't live up to that hype, getting finished in the first round. Danny Barlow has to be your biggest stock dropper on this card. Also, as far as stock droppers on this card, we're going to go back to the main event here. Asu for me, this was a good opportunity for him to, I heard a lot of people complaining about Steve Erceg getting the shot with Brandon Moreno, and this was before, obviously, they switched up the Brandon Royval fight, and people think that he was like this, title challenger, and don't get me wrong, like, he had a good record prior to this. He got that good win over Matthias Nicolau. But again, I think fans do this thing again where they don't look at the opposition of who they're fighting and they think that, okay, future champion or title contender, all that. Asu didn't look like that in this fight. This was all Manel Kape. I expected a little bit better of an effort. And again, we're talking about a fighter who was a decent underdog going into the fight here. He's like plus 180, but 31 years old, losing a key fight like this. Like if this was more competitive, or maybe a fight where I thought that Kopp was in any sort of danger, I wouldn't really give him as much grief here. But the fact of the matter is, you're 31, you're in a division where they're looking for new contenders. This was a tough setback here for Asu. So, and then not to mention the meme of him running away that will live forever. He's the male Chelsea Chandler, right? I guess. So, yeah, Asu's got to be a stock dropper on here with him losing a pretty key fight. Okay, next fight, next fighter on the stock drop list. Another favorite that ended up losing on this card. That was William Gomis. And look, a lot of people felt like Gomis did not win his last fight against Joe Anderson Brito. But yeah, he had a nice win streak going into this. Hadn't lost a fight since, 2016? So he has this really good win streak, coming off a fight that people didn't think he won. And now he loses to Haider Emil, a much older fighter than him, 27 years old. That's a tough loss there for Gomis. Still relatively young, can certainly turn it around, but I expect a little bit more in this fight. And I think a lot of people did too, because like I said, he was a decent favorite going into this fight. We'll do a quick honorable mention here as far as stock droppers. And just have to mention him just because he's probably out of the UFC right now, and that's Julian Marquez. It's unfortunate because there was a point where, he was getting a couple wins, looked like he had some good momentum, but now he's lost 4 in a row. You remember there was a point where, again, coming into the UFC, it only lost the one fight to Di Chirico. And then had a couple wins, and then ever since then it's been all losses, and not exactly the best competition either. I mean, Gregory Rodriguez, sure, Marc-Andre Barrios, Zach Reese, Cody Brundage, you got to get out of those fights. I think unfortunately Marquez is just one of those fighters where his chin is caught up to him and he just cannot sustain any further damage here, so he's going to get released from the UFC. But also I think it's a matter of he's got other things going on outside the cage. So Julian Marquez, stock dropper simply for the fact that he's going to be cut. And then same sort of thing with Austin Lane here. Unfortunately, Austin Lane was a cool story because obviously former NFL player, did lose to Greg Hardy on Contender Series, came back, won his other Contender Series fight, and has not gone well since then. Yes, he gets the win over Robulis, but I imagine him losing he's had a no contest. Since he's been back, he's been 1-3 and with a no contest. So that's probably going to exit him from the UFC as well at 37, although it is an older division. But yeah, that's kind of where we're at right now with Austin Lane. So yeah, let me know what you think in the comments. If there's anyone I missed, obviously there was a couple interesting fights. There was the Nasrat Ribovics fight as well. Yeah, this was just another typical Apex card, so not a ton to take away as far as the stock risers and stock droppers. But like I said, let me know in the comments your biggest 3 stock risers and your 3 biggest stock droppers. Would love to hear from you as far as an opinion on that. And because again, there's a lot of different ways you can look at this. I like looking at how's the performance, what's the context of the fighter overall in the division, all these different things. They all sort of add up in terms of how I come about my list. And sometimes it's easier than others. This one was a bit harder just because again, you don't have some of the name power on this card. But like I said, let me know in the comments your top 3 and bottom 3. And while you're there, follow me on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram at Lynch on Sports. This is a stock report. Do this after every UFC event. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I'll talk to you guys soon.